Note the field, scraping HTML pages. Now, there's definitely times when you need to do some automation that involves reading information from a web page. So that's what we're going to cover here. Not necessarily downloading executables or attaching to a BitTorrent stream. There's lots of things that obviously involve the web, but we're going to focus on having Windows PowerShell retrieve web pages and then extract or scrape information from those web pages HTML. This is going to be a really short nugget. All I have to do is show you how to download web page content and then show you how Windows PowerShell can actually parse through that and make some key information very easy to access. So I'll show you a couple of techniques, a couple of tricks. Keep in mind, everything we're going to be covering is applicable to version 3 and later. It's not impossible to do some of these things in version 2, but it's a little bit more detailed because PowerShell doesn't have as much built-in functionality. So you wind up having to sort of do it all manually using the .NET framework. We won't be covering that approach here, so I'm hoping you at least have access to a version 3 machine. Now I'm going to be working on Windows 8 because that's where I have version 3 installed, and the tricks I'm going to show you do require version 3. So the command we're going to be playing with here is invoke web request. I'll take a quick look at its help. This is designed to download the content from a web page. Now I need to point out that depending on the type of web page you're accessing, this can be very, very simple or very, very complicated. In fact, if you look at the examples of this, there's an example of something fairly complicated. Let's pop it up in Show Window and get down to the examples. There's one fairly extensive one. This is not quite it. This is a good one of how to send a query to Bing and then retrieve some of the links from it. Example 2 is a good one. The thing about some web pages is that when you access the web page, let's say you're logging in, and the example they use here is to Facebook. You can see here. You have to accept a cookie back from the web server, and the web server sends you that little bit of information so that it can identify you on future visits. And then every time you re-access a web page, you have to resend that cookie to the server so that it knows who you are. You can kind of think of that as a session identifier. It's how it keeps track of you. And so what this is doing is invoking web request, and it's retrieving that web page, and it's saving that cookie information or session information into the variable FB. And so you can then look at that variable. And then from then on, they're resending that information back to the web browser, web session FB, every single time they access a page. So this is a fairly detailed example. I'm not going to get quite that detailed here. I really just want to get you started because the whole back and forth of HTML and cookies and HTTP requests and all that can get pretty complicated. So we're going to keep it fairly simple, and I'm going to start with response equals invoke web request, and we're actually going to, let's do this here. I'll show you how I find this. Let's start with the Bing. Oh, heck with Bing. Let's go to Google. Google's far more interesting, right? Telling someone you binged them just sounds weird. Okay, so we're Googling, and there we go. This is going to give us the URL query string we need. So I'm going to copy that to the clipboard and paste it into my URI. A little right-click action. So my entire response is now in the response variable, and this is not just the raw HTML. In fact, that's a little bit easier maybe if we pipe that to get member. We have access to this all elements property. Now, this parsing, this ability of PowerShell to take that HTML response and break it down the way I'm going to show you, that capability is dependent upon Internet Explorer being installed on the computer, because PowerShell is actually leveraging some code from IE to make this happen. On a computer that does not have IE, you can still use this, but you will not get it as extensive of a breakdown of information. So this all elements property contains 164 elements, and it's basically gone in and broken down every single HTML tag into a separate element. So I could grab the first one here, And you can see the tag name is an exclamation point. I'm guessing that's probably the initial doc type. Yeah, and there's one. So that's the initial HTML tag, and that has a ton of information. The next one is the head tag, right? So all this information does get extensively broken down. So we've got all elements. The base response, this is the underlying core response. The raw content is here. You've also, well, the content is here. It's somewhat parsed. You've got raw content down here. Forms, so if there are any input forms on the page, any headers that were sent, any images, any input fields, whether they were in forms or not, and any links. And links is the one I'm going to play with. So let's make that a little simpler. Let's try and format that as a table and ask for the inner HTML and the href. So we can get a little table of every single thing that we got as hits. It looks like a lot of these up here are hits. Oh, these are Google's things, right? This is, you can see, this is the search, images, maps, play. This is these buttons across here, shopping, images. And so then we've got calendar, translate, mobile. Those are all Google links. Search settings, web history, language tools. So this is breaking down every single HTML link that was on the page for us. So this is one neat way that you can scrape information. Now let's take a look at a different property here. Instead of links, let's look at content. That is just the raw HTML that was sent to us by the server. With that, you could potentially use a regular expression to parse through that and find things. For example, let's match that against, and we're going to be totally ad hoc here. Let's try and find any span tags. So span, it did match, and we got a matches, and it would have found the first one. So you can start playing with that with regular expressions too. A neat way to get content from the web, a neat way to quickly parse through it. Something you have to be a little cautious about, and this is probably easier to see in Internet Explorer. Let's go back here. Let's do Jeffrey Snover. You'll notice that as I'm typing, it's repopulating my search, right? This is that sort of type on demand. Well, that creates problems. If you look at the source, if you look at the actual page that was sent to your web browser, this doesn't contain any of the search results. This just contains essentially this blank page. As you type, your web browser is running JavaScript code that's in that page. And that JavaScript is going out to Google's servers and dynamically retrieving information and dynamically updating the page. Well, PowerShell can't do that. That's why PowerShell, when we generated that list of links, wasn't showing any of the search result links. It was just showing the links that are on this raw base page here. Just these things. All this stuff was there. This link was there. But there's nothing here. So PowerShell isn't an interactive web browser. That's one of the limitations of using this technique, is that PowerShell is going to see the JavaScript code, but it's not going to execute it like a web browser would. So there are some limitations for this. Certain websites are easier to use than others. You need to understand what you're looking at. You need to kind of understand how these work to know when that technique is going to be useful. All right, I promised that would be a quick one, so hopefully you agree. Just showed you how to download some web page content using the invoke web request commandlet. Keep in mind that is v3 and later. And how to access some key information once Windows PowerShell receives that and parses it out. Keep in mind that the parsing is dependent on having a computer where Internet Explorer is installed. So this is primarily useful on client computers then. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.